So there it was, and I came back, and it was interesting because they were just starting the fire science program, fire science programs around the country, and they were doing the same thing at Phoenix College, which is a community college there in Phoenix. So and I started teaching hydraulics.
Oh, okay.
And I taught hydraulics for years and years. And in those days, hydraulics was a pretty standard course because we did hydraulic calculations. You know, all that stuff. You studied hydraulics.
Friction loss.
That's all that stuff we went
29.2.
Yeah, whatever, yeah, 30d squared times the square root. You never forget that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bernoulli's principle.
Bernoulli's principle. Sure, absolutely.
And one day I was doing something, and the dean, the guy who taught firefighting tactics, keeled over. So she said, couldn't you teach firefighting tactics? And I said, attaboy. And I taught, and in fact, it was kind of funny. I taught tactics probably for 20 years in that program. And then both of my sons taught that same class.
Wow.
I think Nick taught tactics after I did. I think that the Brunacini family taught tactics at Phoenix College for about 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting, yeah. And both Nick and John did it. And
Wow.
they were a lot better teachers than I was. They did great though. But yeah, so it was really interesting to get to use a lot of the stuff that I had learned and apply it in the system and help people with it too. And that obviously helps yourself, you know. I mean, you learn more than anybody else does. But I think what it did, looking back on it, is it established me as a leader in this system, as a teacher. There was people related to me, and I got to know people in a teacher-student. And we were all about the same age, so it wasn't like I was some big college professor. I was just a guy that was maybe a half a step ahead of them in understanding what we were talking about. I mean, so it wasn't like I was some great authority or anything. So we all kind of learned it together, I guess, in the process.
Oh. So,
but it was kind of an interesting experience.
Is that where the birth of Fireground Command, your first book, came from?
But see, it was interesting because we were teaching in the community college there, and then I was getting promoted. So I'm going through the ranks, and I ended up as the assistant chief in charge of the firefighting division. So I was actually the battalion chief's boss. And we were trying to develop kind of an approach and an improvement in the way we managed sort of tactical activities. In other words, how do you somehow supervise and control and create effective sort of tactical responses on the fire ground? And about that time, they were beginning to develop in the early 70s ICS in Southern California. So we actually went to I went to Southern California, I don't know, probably a half a dozen times, and sat in the meetings that they were doing.
With Mr. Manning and the people.
All those guys, yeah. No, it was, yeah.
The real birth.
And I was a fly on the wall. I mean, so I brought that back to Phoenix, and it was interesting that we developed from ICS. We developed a program there, and we wrote a set of procedures, and we thought we had, and we're about finished with them. And I always laugh about this with folks. We're just about done with this, and I'm thinking, we're just about finished with all this development stuff. And in one of the meetings, there's an old guy, God, I can see his face right now, and he raised his hand and he said, this is all really good, Chief Brunacini. He says, but what do you want us to do when we're the incident commander? I said, wow. I said, hang on, I'll be right back. And about 6 months later, I went back. And it was probably the most, the smartest question anybody ever asked when he asked it. Because we had talked about the structure and developed a program for the structure of the command system, but we never answered the guy's question. We never wrote a job description for the incident commander. And that's where we came up with the 8 functions of command. And what it was really an answer to his question, to say, okay, this is what I want you to do. And we developed it all together. I mean, I didn't go off and invent it. But we said it has to be functional. It has to be something that we can write a procedure, we can train people in it, we can actually apply it, and then we can evaluate it.
But I think that's the beauty of it, and the beauty of what you've done over your entire career and what you're doing right now, is that it's always been okay. The review process has been as important as every other part of it.
Oh, yeah.
And we've challenged it You know, at your first IMS symposium, I got up and gave a speech about why I didn't think the first dude should assume command anymore, which people thought I was kidding for the first 5 minutes. I wasn't kidding. You know, what I'm reading's leading me to believe that in some systems, it's probably better not to. And not in all systems and not in all cases,
Yeah.
but in some systems. And that was, you were like, hey, that's some good stuff. Why? It's not, where a lot of systems, I think, fall down is that they see a problem, they come up with a solution, and that's the solution, and it's never reviewed. It's never.
Well, if you can't test a solution with discussion, then you haven't thought about it enough.
But again, I
In other
think
words,
it goes back to you in 1958 being with guys who allowed you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it was all right to be
Yeah.
the kid with all the questions. Not only was it all right, they fostered it. They promoted it. They
see,
would send you to school so you had more questions.
Well, I think what it was, and I don't mean this critically. In fact, I mean it as a huge compliment to them. I asked questions they couldn't answer, and not because they were dumb. It was just that the system had not developed itself to the point that they really understood. I think with some of what I got to learn at Oklahoma State.
Well, I think we're seeing that today. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we're seeing the system
Yeah,
today
that's right.
struggling with new information.
That's right. No, oh boy. Ooh.
And the ability to get information infinitely faster and more comprehensively than ever before. I mean, in the past we could get information piecemeal and parsed to us
Yeah.
from one radio, two radios. Now with digital technology, you know, and we laughed about this in the command center. We said that Nick almost beat the two of us up when we said we wanted to create a fourth position, the information officer, remember?
No, absolutely.
And it's just a guy to take the information and
Process
make it
information.
actionable.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Data without analysis is just interesting. It's not useful. But I think that's the beauty of what Blue Card and Fire Ground Command and your legacy in the fire service so far is that it's okay to question everything. And as a matter of fact, you better be questioning it, because if you just sit with it, it's stale.
But you know, there's an interesting change, I think, is that I kind of got to touch the clay while it was soft. In other words, in 1958, the fire service in and of itself was pretty simple. It was not very sophisticated. It was very basic. It was very effective, too. I don't mean that critically at all. If you look at 50 years of development, you look at how, let me flatter us, how sophisticated we are today as a service. Sometimes we don't pay a lot of attention to that. So today, when you look at the development, I think what you're talking about, it should be development that is in the progression of us developing more and more effective solutions in the system. It doesn't mean that something is wrong. In other words, the technology tactically that we've applied up until now is the best technology that we could develop. Now, just as an example, based on testing, what they're starting to see and say and to represent is a new, different, better way to do that. It doesn't mean what we did up until now is wrong.
Exactly.
It just
right.
means it's a foundation for us to go to the next step.
That's exactly
We ought to
right.
have a celebration for attacking from the unburned side. It probably kept us alive for the last 45 years.
And there's going to be fires where that's absolutely what you've got to do.
Absolutely, Bobby. But to say, and this business is saying, okay, we're binary and this is either right or wrong, I think is not only counterintuitive, but it's counterproductive for us to go to the next level. In other words, I don't want to go to the next level if somebody's going to beat the tar out of me because of what I'm doing today. In other words, that's almost a chance that a lot of people aren't going to take.
Well,
Instead of saying, what's a better way to do it? And say, we'll celebrate what we've done up until now.
Well, and I think you laid a great argument for that point by saying back then it was simpler. And it was.
It was,
It
absolutely.
was. You had single pane windows. You had a fuel load that was lighter. You know, it really,
Traditional fuel load.
the first
Buildings were built like tanks.
Exactly. The first paper I could really find on plastics and fires was written by a guy named D.L. Bertling in '53. That's when plastics, and he was talking about plastic building components. They were building components. And interestingly enough, just yesterday I came across a study that's being done right now on plastic, basically synthetic building components.
Yeah.
And so, you know, don't throw out your skinny ties, you know, and you always got to keep studying the problem. But if you think about it, simple system, simple problem. The problem's gotten more complex. The duties, responsibilities have gotten more complex. The mission, if you will, of the fire service is evolving. Just as my great-great-grandfather on duty with the FDNY back in the day used to roll a guy over a barrel.
Yeah.
Well, that was EMS. It was bad air out, good air in, and they knew it worked. People would drowning victims would revive being rolled over a barrel. Now they didn't know they were compressing the diaphragm, and they didn't know they didn't know how to raise the dead like the paramedics do today.
Yeah.
But they clearly knew what their mission was, and I think that with the fire service today, part of what we've got to be careful about, and I truly believe this, is mission creep, and that can be an issue. But mission review and mission policy and mission development with the new information, like you're talking about, unburned, burn. Now you talk about the role of the IC. When that guy asks the question, "What do you want me to do?" We almost want that guy to sit back and think.